So yeah, this is the Meet the Candidates session of ThinkTC. Again, we're this newly formed blob of a group, and our goal is basically to make Traverse City more attractive to young professionals, young talent, that type of thing. So we're all about connecting creators in town and connecting them to the town and resources available. So with that, we'd like to start getting some feedback from potential candidates, and which you folks are, correct? We got the right group. And again, this is for the City Commission spots coming up in November. 3 spots are available. And yeah, the campaign season will be starting somewhat soon. So again, we kind of ran through, crowdsourced half a dozen questions, different people in our online community, and then people tweeted in a few more questions. So what we'll start with is just some intros. So maybe just a name, your current position. So we can meet you guys.
Hi everyone, I'm John Reid. I work for Simplicity. I'm a sales manager.
Tim Werner. I'm on the Planning Commission currently.
I'm Jody Bergman, and I'm currently on the City Commission. And I'm not doing something for that. I'm a project manager at Comstock Construction.
Gary Howe. I wear several hats. I'm professionally a photographer, but also instructor at the college. And currently serve on the Planning Commission with Jody, and then I'm also used to be on Parks and Rec Commission, so I've been involved in serving the city for 4 years.
So maybe we'll just start with Johnny for the first question here, which is, why are you motivated to run?
I've been a resident of Traverse most of my adult life. Traveled the world and came back, and the reason I came back was because of Traverse City. And when let's make it better. That's my goal. I have a 4-year-old son, I'm a single father, and I want to make the city as good as it was when I was growing up, maybe even better for my son. So keep up the work that the commission has done the last 4 years, and keep moving on, keep moving forward.
My background is a scientist and engineer, and so it's slightly different than some of the city and past planning city commissioners, but everybody brings a different perspective to it, and I think everybody that does run, whether currently or in the past, feels they can make a difference and they want to be part of the improvements to the city. I agree, it's a great place to live, that's why we're here, but it doesn't mean we can't make it better, and I'd like to be part of that decision-making process.
Well, first, I'll be totally honest. I haven't totally thrown my hat into the ring for another round. I've served 2 terms, and sometimes you second guess and think, well, maybe people are sending me a fresh perspective. But on the other hand, I really enjoyed it. I like doing it, and there's some unfinished business that I've been involved in for several years, and I'd like to see that brought to fruition, and keep it going. Not that other people can't push it forward, but get your little pet project and you really like the hate to leave in the middle of it. So I'm a little bit torn, but got about a month to decide. So.
A lot of similar reasons, as have already been expressed. Can always make a great place better, so it's kind of how I approach things. I'm also really interested in something I haven't quite seen at the city. Sometimes we hit it, sometimes we don't, but I haven't seen where we actually measure things for that next 30 or 40 or 50 years. How is it going to impact the city? So you have policy and you have spending. Well, if you make those today, are you just solving today's problem, or are you really planning ahead? So those are some things I'm just really interested in, and feel like I'm doing something that hasn't always been expressed, or at least noticed, I should say. Sometimes, one thing you learn at the city is something's happened that you just, if as someone who's sitting in the audience, notice it.
Just the audience and follow-ups there. Just dying to ask. Yeah. Keep it brewing. So maybe we'll start with Gary now. Reverse. How would you describe Traverse City's niche, and what makes Traverse City special as a place?
I mean, the obvious one's the water, the resources. Traverse City has is the X factor of being connected to something bigger, like a greater, wider world. And I think that's what a lot of small towns don't have that we have. Because to be honest, a lot of small towns have great nature as well, and high quality of life. I like to think we're the best in that, but I've been other places in Door County, West County, it's just beautiful. But we have connections, and great embassy, which helps connect us, the university center, things like that, the airport, which is a 4-minute drive from my house. I think all those things add to Traverse City. And I know growing up, for me, I grew up in Lake Ann, small, but I had a bigger connection to a wider world because of people I knew, or run into at school, and exchange students, things of that nature. So I think there's an X factor.
I don't think Traverse City fits into any niche. I think it's unique in its own right. It has a small town character. Yet it offers a lot of amenities that a much larger city would. But, the arts, obviously the natural resource, the environment. It's a great place to live. And it's been that way for a long time. There really isn't any negatives. When I was growing up here, there was a lot of negatives. And we didn't get first run. I mean, I'm really going to date myself. We didn't get first run movies until after the Academy Awards were already given out. So, there was only 2 movie houses, and so we've come a long way. And I just think that we can keep it going and improve on that.
It's hard to say anything new when people go in front of you, but to touch on something that Gary mentioned, which was very important to me when I moved here with my wife 13 years ago, is the airport. I think that does set us apart. Certainly there's the natural beauty, which I think one touched on. But geographically, we're also a hub here for the surrounding counties with Munson and NMC and such. And everybody's aware of that, so that's not a unique thing that I'm espousing. But to me, the airport was very important because that provided connectivity either to Chicago, Minneapolis, Detroit, to some place you could fly internationally, fly nationally to get wherever it was I needed to go for business. And I think that's very important as far as setting us apart from other small towns, let's say, across the country. Because we've got all these natural resources, the arts and such, but you can get places. You're not stuck driving several hours to get to an airport to try to get to where you're headed.
Same kind of thing. Trying to add to some great things. I would say the niche we do have is that we excel at almost everything we do. 3 weeks ago, we were rated the best theater in the world. It seems like every other week we get a top 10 or we're in the New York Times, or we're making Martha Stewart's magazine. That's what makes Traverse City special. That's what makes people from all over the world and all over the country know about Traverse City. It's not just the Cherry Festival or the Film Festival. Our wine industry agriculturally is growing at a rate that I don't think the Peninsula Township Planning Commission can even think about trying to keep track. So let's keep that up. Let's keep it growing. We got a lot of room here. There's a lot of space to grow, and have a good future.
All right, so that was good news, and then the bad news next section. One of the things that this group is kind of its mission is to make the area more attractive to young people, like I was saying. So the next question is, what do you think is the #1 barrier to a young person deciding to either stay here or relocate? And how might we address that?
We've done a really good job in the last 5 years, and I was speaking with commissioners before the meeting about how I applauded them, how they kept aggregating Traverse City. And I don't think people realize how important that really is for our town and for young professionals. I got a chance to have lunch with McKeel a couple weeks ago, and we talked about that. And he said he was so close to moving to Scottsdale if they couldn't get the parking deck in their new location approved. So that's a great thing, and we need more of that. We need more businesses. We need to attract more larger businesses like Agri that employ people of our age that are outside the box thinkers that just want to make the place better.
afford to be here or you know, can't make, so you're going to have to go to a different area or to an area where you can find those two things. So if we can somehow, you know, increase the jobs, get more affordable housing, to get those opportunities opened up, to attract more people and to keep the young people we have. My kids grew up here. I'm a fifth generation Traverse City person. My kids are gone. They don't have enough. They couldn't find an opportunity in Traverse City. So I know those, to me, those are the two most important things.
So maybe we'll just interject here. This is Ross Richardson. And so we've gone through a couple questions, but maybe if you could just let us know your name and where you currently work. And
First of all, let me apologize for being late. My wife had an appointment at the hospital today, so indeterminate time and went with it. Then we hoped. My name is Ross Richardson. I was up in Traverse City for about 13 years. I live on 873 Washington Street on the corner of Rose, Washington. And my place of employment was actually in Springfield, Illinois. My wife and I opened a small restaurant there. Well, we were still in our 20s. It's been almost 36 years. And we still operate here. Our son is our on-site manager, and the process is slowly shifting responsibilities to him.
so maybe we'll continue there. We were just talking about what is the number one barrier, perhaps, for a young person to move to Traverse City, and what can be done about it in your eyes.
I agree with a lot of what was said before, and I would also agree that there's no panacea to attract young people. Everybody's different. I think we do have an issue in town, something we'll talk about later, too, the affordable housing. You know, currently, if you're a young professional and want to move back to Traverse, most likely you have a family connection here, and it's that network that you can rely upon. I mean, I did it myself. If my sister didn't live here when I moved back, you know, I wouldn't have had that subsidized rent that I had. So that's very beneficial. But really, what I'm interested in and what I see a need for, and something that a lot of small towns struggle with, is how do we create space, public space particularly, but also private space like this, corporate production space, where people can connect. Because when you have connections, you know, talent attracts talent. So if you have places where people just naturally connect, and not just the intimates, but strangers, you know, you're building that social capital. I think that's something government can do, because we design the streets, we design the public parks, we can actually brand the community in ways that private businesses can do, but only limited. So, you know, I think that's really important. It's missed out, that social capital. That we have a lot of potential. I mean, when you see the film festival here, and you know, people come downtown, they stay downtown, and they're here for 8 hours, maybe even longer, and they're not busy all that 8 hours, so they just connect with people. The connections that I see here in the film festival, you know, I think we need that all year round.
So Ross, did you want to touch on that? Maybe what can be done to make the town more livable for young people and young people to stay here?
Well, I mean, I think the town is livable for young people. I mean, this is, my wife and I live here because we love Traverse City. And we have no other reason to be here. Thankfully, modern communications allows us to operate a business that's 500 miles away. Traverse City is growing. It's one of the very few places in the whole state of Michigan that's growing. Really what it's about, I think, is, you know, not losing what made this place attractive in the first place. I see a tremendous amount of talent, I see a tremendous amount of young talent in this town. Encouraging signs to me is I'm seeing young families, you know, move in to Traverse City and, you know, start raising their kids because it is a great place to raise a family. Obviously, the concerns are, well, do people have places to work and so forth, but I really think that part probably takes care of itself. If you have, you know, if you're an attractive place and smart, creative people are coming here and decide to make this their home, you're going to figure out how to make it work. That's going to come up. The main thing is we don't want to grow in such a way that we lose what made this place so attractive.
So, any feedback? All right. So something that. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Two of the five of you mentioned the possibility of supporting a parking deck. As sure as most people here, just for background, instead of knowing, 2006 city voters rejected referendum to build a parking deck on West Park Street. It's been 6-7 years since then, and nothing's really going on in that area since. Do you think it's time to rehash those discussions to build a parking deck in that area?
Well, Chris, we have built a parking deck since when 2006 was rejected. I was actually part of the group that fought the deck in 2006. And it wasn't just because it was a deck for me, it was also because the city was being asked to sign on to $16 million worth of bonds for what could have been a very dicey project. You only need to look at the hole in Petoskey to figure that maybe we escaped the bullet in that one. I'm not opposed to parking decks per se. I was on the planning commission with Jody when the Old Town deck came through. And there was the city has basically said, in the downtown area, we will provide the parking. So if the city's going to provide the parking, then attract businesses on that basis, and person speak competitively, and they have to make good on that promise. My feeling on parking decks is, let's build a parking deck, but first of all, you have to make sure that you have the development to support it. But secondly, let's turn the surface parking lots into businesses, housing, whatever, at the same time. If we say, okay, we can save on save on the footprint of parking by building a deck, then let's make it on that promise. Because I know one of the things that came up a few years ago and sort of continued was that the DDA wanted to purchase land to turn it into more surface parking. To me, that's not something we should be encouraging. We should.
We definitely need parking on the west end if it's going to develop, bring more development in. There's potential, all kinds of potential down there. And then even the warehouse district needs more parking. So I think the time is right. It's just the opportunity that needs to come along. Typically, government isn't going to just initiate that on its own. It's kind of got to look for a partner. And so if we could find a partner that would be willing to join in and just like Gary did, offer something that entices the city to move it forward. But I think that the original plan was that if you look at the city and you draw a walkable circle, get these parking decks. We've got 2 of them. We're looking at 3 to cover what's currently the business district, shall we say. We're just missing that last piece, and we would have major parking available that would cover the whole entire business district. So I think the time is right if the right project comes along, and we just got to keep working to do that. And I think that it's going to happen. It's going to.
I believe the West End parking deck is a project that's on the DDA's list. It's just a matter of when it's an appropriate time with private partners to move forward with it, and then look into how to do it in a smart way for the community, as Ross was alluding to with the 2006 attempt. And I would agree completely with Ross as far as building a parking deck should be tied to eliminating some of the surface parking, freeing up some of that property for development, whether it's housing or business opportunities.
I'm trying not to rehash anything, but it's a reminder that parking decks cost about $25,000 per space, so they're really expensive. So you cold in the winter? You know, is there a little warming area in there? Just little public niceties that don't cost much when you're talking about building a Is there a way that we can build in some sort of revenue sharing to mitigate the traffic that's created on the edges of town, coming into downtown, parking at that parking deck? Is there a way to add on to the revenue that stream that we're getting? Can you take 5, 7, 10% and put that into traffic calming in other parts of the city? I want to see a comprehensive plan when we do these things, not just we're building a deck to park cars, and that's going to start business. That's great, but that's very two-dimensional. What more can we do? So, you know, we won't always succeed at that. Sometimes budgets and opportunities just aren't there, but at least let's have that conversation.
I just got to follow up, I can't stand it. Being that I've been serving on the commission, I want to assure you that we do look at all those things. We do look out at that 30 to 50-year life cycle. But, you know, paying for these things isn't an easy task, and to be able to even accomplish it is really tough. So we're not making those decisions in a vacuum. Not against, you know, Gary's not privy to some of that, but I just want to let you know, I don't want you to go away thinking the commission just makes these, you know, off-the-cuff decisions. We do look at that long-term investment and payback, and it takes a long term to pay it back. The Haggerty deck, for example, was financed through TIF financing, and it just barely worked out to get that done. So it's a real balance, and it's really tough. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
The last question, going back past parking, we mentioned some of the pitfalls of why government professionals can't stay here. Some of you mentioned housing, some of you didn't, some of you said housing isn't an issue. And in my mind, affordable housing for young professionals ranging from 21 to 30, housing is the number one. Affordable housing is probably the number one biggest issue in my mind, just as a voter. But none of you talk about how we can fix that.
That's actually the very next question.
Key part of the question that he asked, if one says an issue.
We were actually for the real question, we know it's coming.
Yeah, Jeff, to answer your question, I don't think there is an answer yet right now. There's ideas, and like everybody else says, timing is key. But I do know this, one of my best friends works at Traverse City State Bank, and he cannot leave his car, move his car at all throughout the day, because once he leaves, he'll never find another parking spot. And he shows up early to get a parking spot at Southwest Front. So, is there an issue? Absolutely. And definitely we gotta find an answer.
Perhaps if only you could find housing closer to the state bank, you could walk. So with the issue of housing, what do you think might be able to do to make more affordable housing options?
Well, first of all, the Planning Commission and City Commission has already done quite a bit structurally, and Jody certainly was a big participant in this. We have the neighborhood enterprise zones, which for chunks of up and down 8th Street, for instance, there are incentives to homeowners to rehab and even build a house. There are now structures where if a development comes in, incentives are given to a developer if they include a percentage of affordable housing as part of it. They've made some of the footprint requirements smaller so that houses can be built on smaller pieces of ground. The ADU thing, which was approved, will help provide some extra pieces of housing, although that's going to be pretty small just based on what I know. The problem is you don't want to end up with a whole city full of affordable housing, like say, for instance, Detroit, where a house that used to sell for $200,000 you can now pick up for $15,000. Unfortunately, to me the biggest obstacle is the cost of real estate right in Traverse City. When I moved here from Illinois, it was like every drives the price higher is one of the strengths of the city. And certainly, people who have already bought houses don't want to see it and say, gee, well, we just cut the price of everything and make it more affordable. There is affordable housing in certain areas of town. We need to invest in the neighborhoods. We need to make the streets better. We need to extend the sidewalk system, make them more, especially kid-friendly for young families. Most of Traverse Heights is, I think, quite affordable for anyone to buy a house. And there still is a very high percentage of rental housing. I've heard the figure about 40% of the housing within the city is rental. So there is some out there. It's a little harder to find, but what we have to do is keep. The city commission, I believe, has to keep working to make the town desirable, to keep the neighborhood strong, and hopefully that people will get in front of us to live. That's acceptable.
I have a question for you. What do you consider affordable monthly?
That's relevant to how much you make. So that directly ties into jobs. So if you can't find a job, if you make $28,000 a year, you can't live within downtown. So I mean, the house just next to me, I live on 2nd Street, just sold for $380,000 for a 2-bedroom house. Ludicrous. You can't afford that unless you make $200,000 a year. I mean, it's a big question for me to ask and for you to be like, this is what's going to happen. But I think there's key, like you mentioned a lot of policy things, and those are great. Those don't really impact people under 30, I would say. Just because, I mean, low income is a difficult thing to classify for sure. I don't want to say low income, I want to say affordable housing. Affordable needs to be relevant to the type of young professionals, and the more talented things people are, the higher level things are going to spend and have more money. Because moving back to Traverse City was a huge, rise in cost of living. We know that cost of living for housing in Traverse City is on par with a lot of big cities around the U.S. So it's quite amazing that it's a city of 15,000 people, but the cost of housing is on par with, say, Chicago.
To answer his question, I did some research earlier today because I currently live over by the Salvation Army Memorial, and I'm actually the first house in the city limits. I went on TAR. Everybody knows TAR.com. Everybody's ever looked at a house, everybody knows when I TAR. I searched a 10-mile from downtown Traverse City. I picked, I can't remember what address I picked, like on Front Street here. There's 147 houses currently on the market from 115 to 165 grand. Now, the rural development loan is the zero down loan still, and it's still available for first-time home buyers. So there's 144 houses that you can buy for between $600 and $850 a month with insurance and taxes on an average. Now, granted, 100 of those are outside the city limits. But what we really need to look at is the economy that we have right now with interest rates being at 3.25 for a 15-year and 4.25 for a 30-year. Right now, we have the ability to buy a home, maybe not making 28, but making 40. And if a young professional is coming to Traverse, chances are they have a degree. Chances are they're going to make 40, start out at 40. What we don't have is I saw, I don't know, I think you commented on Facebook. Something about studio apartments. Somebody commented on, I think it was here. Somebody commented on studio. We don't have any of those. There's only a few on Front Street. The $500 to $600, $750 all-inclusive rent is not here, and I totally agree with you. And we need to find it. There's what's that?
We were talking about that skating park or whatever, and we were talking about really cool 500 square foot space-saving designs built in. Cabinets are built into the walls and things. Only a certain demographic is going to choose to live, in there because they're not spending time in their apartment. They don't need the space. They don't, there's a place to put the bike or whatever, and it's somewhere centrally located. They'll be outside all the time. They can live in 500 square feet, especially when it's in a cool area around Lake Line.
So that's what we don't have. And there's a lot of ideas out there, and I don't want to compound on them. I have a lot of ideas. I don't want to waste a lot of time.
the things that already been said, but back to what, that's a combination of what both gentlemen said, I think, is there are houses out there. They might not be attractive places and desirable places necessarily for young professionals. Think, oh, this isn't what I had in mind. But I think what the city can do is complete that sidewalk network, improve the infrastructure that's available to make it a more attractive neighborhood, because then as people invest in those houses, maybe they'll rehab a house, improve it. Of course, then real estate prices will start to rise in that neighborhood, which gets to Ross's point, which is a good thing overall, as long as you can get in the first 10, 15 years. But as far as what can the city do, we touched on a lot of the policy things that have already been done, and I don't know that there's a lot that can be added to that necessarily, but I would like to see infrastructure improvements where needed throughout the city, and it tends to be the lower end of the economic scale, if you will, where we don't have complete sidewalk networks. And I think the city could step up and make improvements there. It would be helpful. Maybe not in the short term, but over the course of several years, I think you would see improvements as people are more willing to invest in the homes that are there.
I understand your predicament. Like I already said, I have a couple daughters that are going through it. I've done a lot of research trying to help them, find things. And I know that jobs in this, there's two issues here. We're talking, the city commission deals with in the city limits. I mean, we impact a little bit regionally, but we're making policy for in the city limits. That's only like 7 square miles. A lot of people think, it's this whole huge greater area, but it's not. The property values are really high, so we're going to really struggle on that affordable housing issue, and that's been a stumbling block. We put a lot of policies in place, and unfortunately, a lot of those started, the economy kind of took the downturn. We haven't seen a lot of fruits of the labor come through. We're hoping that maybe there'll be some developers out there that, we've incentivized some things, even in the downtown area. If someone buys a piece of property and put an extra floor on their building, it makes everything cheaper within that building. And we want people downtown. We want people living downtown. I think the younger people want to be where the action is. They want to live where they can walk and be close to work. And we don't have that. And it's going to be a real struggle. The mentality in town for years, this has been home ownership type neighborhoods. Every time we try to bring something forward like ADUs, it's been talked about for years. We finally got a pilot program passed in Traverse Heights. Hopefully it will catch on and maybe spread throughout some other areas in the city and be a good thing. Rental units in town, there's a lot of negativity towards rentals. And I personally don't think everyone that rents is a bad person. There's a lot of people that need to rent, and I think, for example, ADUs can be some of the smaller units, that could then be more affordable within our neighborhoods. I know my kids, that's the first thing they want. They want a cool space, they want it close to the action, and they would rather be in a neighborhood, with lots of people. They want to be where there's a lot of people around. We're going to struggle with that. I'm going to be very honest with you. It's just going to be really tough, but you work on, like you said, if we can get some better jobs. I know that not everyone walking into Traverse City is going to land a $40,000 a year job. That's the minority. Probably the norm is maybe 28, 30-ish, if you're lucky. And that's with a college degree and some master's degrees. I know there's master's degrees, people out there. I'm on a daycare board, and there's people with master's degrees working there that are making $10 an hour with no benefit. So I know it's a struggle. We just got to work on it and try to. There's things we can do. The tax incentives that the city can do. Make it easier for developers to build and get a return. And we've seen some of it happen up at the Commons. There's some events and affordable units up there, but it isn't enough. enough, it's just a few and they're really hard to come by. It's just really, that's a really tough one, and it is, the jobs go with the affordable housing, and to me, affordable housing is, for people making 28, 30,000 single income, something they can afford to live in.
Question again. There's a lot. I've had to listen to a lot. A lot. I try not to, again, restate things. I hear 40,000 being thrown out. I hear 28,000. I have graduate work level. I teach at the college, so I'm one of those young professionals. I make a whole lot less than 30,000. I'm able, and I own in Traverse City. I'm able to do that because, one, I got lucky. I have some friends in real estate, but also I chose my neighborhood because, for me at least, it is walkable. My neighbors don't walk as much as I do, but that was a conscious choice because I know I can save $8,000 to $12,000 a year. So Traverse Heights is affordable, but it's not affordable in the sense that that's exactly where young families are going to want to move because it's still car dependent. There's not much you can do over there comfortably and conveniently and enjoyably without a car. My girlfriend reminds me of that all the time when I say, let's walk to the movie. It's a mile and a half. So I think one thing we can do, and Traverse Heights is a good example, because we have 8th Street corridor, and then we also have Garfield Street corridor, we have Barlow, which is a lot of room to increase density. Increase density in terms of housing, but also mixed use, get some more businesses over there, get a little flavor of downtown in our other corridor regions. So that people, when they want to go out to eat, they don't just assume, oh, I'm going downtown. Or they're not, or even worse, is they're getting in their car because they're going to go, out to South Airport and 31 there, because it's the only place they can really think of. It's like, oh, I'm just going to walk down to the corner because I can actually cross Garfield without having to drag my kid across a 4-lane street. I always use agave. I use it all the time in terms of my example here. It's my local pub. It's a quarter of a mile away, but it is really atrocious to walk there. If I'm by myself, it's probably not that big deal. I'll cut people's yards and I'll run across the road. But when we go with friends and we go with friends and family, we're not choosing agave, even though it's my neighborhood place. And that's just a crime, I think. It's in the city limits. There's no reason anywhere in the city should we have a suburban style design to it. Jody mentioned we're at 7 square miles dimensions. That's 2 miles by 4, actually, maybe even 3. You can walk a lot of places, but do you choose to walk? And that's a question that we need to address. We need to address starting today. Again, that's where I get my 30-year timeline. I want to see sidewalks next year, knowing that I'm probably not going to see them next year. But let's have a little more momentum towards that. In terms of affordable housing, a lot has been talked here in terms of the policy. I'm a big supporter of the Commons. There's the home stretch project on the depot property by the filling station where we're going tonight. Those are great examples of where the cities work with partners and partners work with the city to achieve things. I think we also have to start working regionally in terms with our outlying villages. Kingsley is a great little place that's up and coming, I think. And you say, oh, it's car dependent. Well, let's invest in transit. If somebody has to work downtown Traverse City, there's no reason they can't live in downtown Kingsley and have a much quieter life maybe that they prefer than living in downtown Traverse City and take the bus in. I think we're limiting our idea of affordable housing when we just think we have to live right next to where we work all the time. Sometimes there can be a little more space, but we also need to have those transportation choices that allow us to save money in our personal life so we can spend that money on that. Again, there's a lot of good things said that we can find there.
I have a question for you. I work in an organization and have a lot of friends, or an organization which will work with a lot of people who have various types of disabilities. I have a lot of friends who use wheelchairs, friends who are blind, a lot of elderly people that live in the area. Walkability and complete streets are very important to me, and the whole idea of universal accessibility. Are there things that any of you could do
meeting, they're talking budget. It's not the clearest conversation that I've ever witnessed. So it's hard to decipher what's going on when you're on the outside. But at the same time, I do fundamentally believe that the budgeting process is a political discussion. It's not just a spreadsheet. So it doesn't reflect our values of our community. If you're going to spend 1.2 or 1.5 million dollars in infrastructure, let's be very sure that we're spending that on the values of the community. And values of the community moving forward, not just on the values of the community that is status quo. So I think complete streets in that regard, yes. So you have to make that choice and commit to it.
If I could comment also, right now the city is allocating about $1.2 million a year for street and sidewalk projects. So, and about 10% of that is for sidewalks. Which is not a lot of money, but it's still, 1.25 million more than they were spending 4 or 5 years ago. We had some issues when I was on the planning commission. It was actually a fairly new thing when the planning commission started to review the street projects for the year. And we did get some sidewalks put in, but actually what I'm proudest of was the piece of Barlow between Center and Harbor. Because the original plan was for them just come in and they had a street with no curbs, no sidewalks, no nothing. They were just going to resurface it. And the planning commission as a whole, Jody was part of that as well, said, look, if you're going to build it, you're probably not going to look at it again for 20 years. Why don't you do it right? Well, we don't have enough money. It's like, well, it's not your money. And it took that extra year to do it, but in the process, they put the curbs in, they put a sidewalk on one side, they made it accessible. There's a group home halfway up that hill with about 20 or 25 residents who are all in wheelchairs. And they like to go down to the little Durance Market just south of Harbor. And until that sidewalk was put in, they were just basically in the street taking their life in their hands. The only thing that bothered me about that whole process, and of course we did get it done, was that we had to sort of fight tooth and nail with city staff to get them to do that. Orchard Park neighborhood, the northeast corner of the city, is a neighborhood that is now changing over from people who first settled it, built houses or bought houses there in the 50s and 60s, are now aging out, and young families are starting to move in. And it's really close to both the high school and the Eastern Elementary, and yet there are almost no sidewalks on both sides. And that's something, and there's a park in the middle of it, that again you have to walk on the street to get to. These are things that the city should have a program on. Okay, it's going to take us a while, but we need to do it a piece at a time and fill in all these pieces that are missing.
Kind of building on what Ross was going for there is, the $100,000 or the 1.25 million or 1.5 million for infrastructure in general, between streets and sidewalks, and 100,000 of that towards sidewalks. Those sound like nice numbers, but recently the idea was floated as far as a bond. We do 20 years, within a couple of years, and get that done, and that has been put on hold for a few years. But I would hope that when it is pulled off the shelf and looked at again, that the sidewalks are a significant part of it, because at $100,000 per year, we're really just maintaining the sidewalks we have, and nobody's yet looked at how long will it take to fill all those gaps at $100,000 per year. It's probably 50 to 100 years, I guess, to fill those gaps. So we're kidding ourselves if, 100,000 sounds nice, but we're kidding ourselves if we think we're actually getting anywhere with it in our lifetime. And if we want to make these improvements in our lifetime or our children's lifetimes, we at least have to have a serious conversation of what does the program look like to complete the sidewalk network? How much do we have to spend over how many years? We might decide, that's a little bit much. What's the plan B? That's maybe 75% of those sidewalks, over a little bit longer time period. But at some point, we at least have to see what's our starting, what's missing, how much will it cost, over how many years can we do that? And to date, I have not seen that. It might exist in a file in the engineer's office
basically to do all the streets and sidewalks in a 20-year cycle. They wear out in about 20 years, so you gotta start back over. So we looked at how much it would take to get that cycle going, and that's when we really in earnest started trying to get more money pushed towards infrastructure, because for years there was no money done on infrastructure. You can see what's happened. We've got bad streets. And the sidewalk issue, we focus first, there is a policy that's been written by the city commission, and that's a public document, that the sidewalk issue, that 10% of the money went towards sidewalks, and that we would repair what we had first. We're almost done with repair. We've been doing a lot of repair, if you notice, through the neighborhoods and through the city. So we wanted to get them all, what we had, so that they were in good shape. The next step is going to be infill, where there's missing chunks. And then after that will be neighborhoods that have no sidewalks, like Ross mentioned, to put money into those neighborhoods to actually put the sidewalks in. It's all a function of money, which everything is. And we're going to get there. I think we made a lot of great inroads. And I think, we just discussed about doing this in a couple of years with a bond issue. Good idea on the surface of it, but there's other issues. And one of those issues is that when you do a street, you got to do the sewer and water underneath it. That's not beautiful stuff. It's just stuff that functions. And that raises our sewer and water bills, and it's another thing that makes it unaffordable to live in Traverse City. Since I've been on the commission, and I know I voted for it a few times just because we had to do it, my water and sewer bill is like double. I mean, it's like another tax to me. If you have to pay it to be able to live in the city, and you add it into your monthly bills, it just makes it that much more not affordable. And I think you have to kind of weigh that. If you're going to accelerate all the streets, then you're going to have to accelerate water and sewer, and those prices are all going to go up. So, there's always a lot of other things behind the scenes, and I'm totally for, getting this done, but in a method that makes sense, and you don't want to ruin it, something else that's a good thing, while you're trying to, do other things. You kind of have to weigh it up.
Any other comments? Yeah, question. I'm sure it was some sort of formal decommission, and I'm not sure when that took place, but with the Cass Street Railroad, has there ever been any kind of, way to revitalize that conversation and put in a light rail that goes from South Airport all the way into the Boardman, the dead railroad track runs past my right brain and goes all the way through. I know that people build driveways that they over it and stuff, so obviously it's decommissioned. So anyway, or has there been a conversation, they're putting light rail systems that are self-sustaining and zero emissions footprints and things like that, or just swift on a light moving rail systems that would take, to really hold that open development space out there is for housing past South Airport and take it right into the Brooklyn River. Has that ever been talked, discussed?
I know it was discussed a few years ago. From what I've read about light rails, I really don't think we're dense enough to justify the expense. I think we'd be better off putting money into streets and sidewalks. I don't think we've got enough people using it. Of course, the trouble with it is that it's set in one place. If people aren't in the right place, then they'll use it. That's a nice way.
Yeah, it was more or less so if you built a station on, south of South Airport, so those people and families that are moving into Kingsley, they drive up, park at the station, they hop in the light rail, and they're down into TC after 5-8 minute drive. So it's more or less, it's not necessarily how dense you are here, it's just about there's parking and housing situations here, it can be really affordable, so kind of, but it all would depend on that use, that railroad track that's not being used.
Not to go too much on it, because I think light rail, I hear it a lot. I don't think it's on the short-term list of achievable in this region, but what is achievable is really stellar transit system and an interconnected transit system, and I think that's where the money's best served and more efficiently put.
So is it decommissioned for no use whatsoever? It's not.
But
No, it's still-
MDOT still owns it.
It's still owned, and the city has looked at, we're going to be expanding the trail on the west side of the lake, and part of that will be on some of the right of way, but it's still actually used. Occasionally there is a train that comes in there, very infrequently. But on the light rail issue, to me, that's going to be more of a regional approach. If it was just the city, we could get you to just past 17th Street, and that's the city limits. So you're gonna have to look at that regionally, and I don't think it's viable in the near future just because ridership, you've got to be able to pay for it, and light rail is pretty expensive. So I think you need, like Ross said, a more dense area so you can have ridership that would pay it off. And I don't know if any of you have been to any meetings or locations lately, but Beta is rolling out a whole new system that looks pretty cool, to me anyway, they're calling it Lincoln Loop, and they're going to have the set routes all the way done that will time out so that you can actually come in, like say from Kingsley, and get on, that'll be a link that will get you into the loop that will come around to the set stations. I think it's going to be increasing ridership, and if they can increase ridership, then they can do more. And that's the whole key, is getting it built up where people are actually riding the system, and so we can do more with it.
Closing in on the hour mark, actually. So maybe we'll just do one last round, just kind of a final statement, if you will, or why you think the youth of Traverse City should earn your. How would you earn their vote?
That's actually so. Well, I don't know how I would earn your vote. I would say that Traverse City is a really cool place to live as, sort of an old guy. And I would think that, I don't go to all the festivals and all the beer fest or whatever, but it seems like, as a younger person, there is a lot of stuff to do here. Actually, what attracted my wife and I to Traverse City in the first place, besides the obvious natural beauty, is that you had a high level of culture, a high level of independent restaurants, things to do, all the stuff in Interlaken, all the stuff that happens in town, and yet a very small town. I think there are very few towns this size that offer what Traverse City offers. And then it gets back to all the top 10 lists we keep making. It's getting to the point now where I cringe every time we make another list, because all I can think about is, geez, I'm going to say, we got to go check this place out and see what it's like, Or you hear people coming to the film festival. Wow, I never realized Traverse City was like this. I'm going to go look for a house while I'm here. That kind of thing. Growth is good. Growth funds a lot of things that the government does. Growth pays a lot of bills, but growth also brings problems in the sense of we lose what it was that made it great in the first place. So I'm not saying I'm anti-growth. I think we need growth, but we just have to be careful how we grow and keep making this the desirable place it is.
We talked about a lot of issues today, but we didn't talk about a lot of major issues that Commissioner faces every Monday. And there's a lot of stuff that, as a commissioner, and if I was elected, a lot of things happen behind the scenes, a lot of things that happen that you don't read about in the papers, that these people, as our commissioner, work tirelessly to make things as best as possible. And that's my goal. If I'm elected commissioner. We have a lot of big issues coming down the pipe. Nobody said anything about the fire department today. I had the pleasure of meeting with both chiefs today during lunch. I actually got both of them in the same room, which was fun. And it's going to be an issue, and it's a mess. That's going to be a huge vote. There's a lot of people that are quite for days and days and days, 8 hours a day, talk about. That's what I want to concentrate on. Is I want to become the best educated voter that I can make. If I'm elected commissioner, obviously I'm going to vote for you guys, and that's what I want to do. I want to become the most educated person. So.
I'm not going to be able to convince you to vote for me in a couple sentences, so I'll just, hopefully over the next couple months you can learn more about me. I'll be open to talk with you, sit down and talk. But I am very impressed that all of you are here this far in advance of the November election, and I hope that you stay plugged into the community at all sorts of levels and carry this energy forward.
I would ditto that comment. I think my perspective, and if you follow the commission, you probably know what my perspective is, but when I first ran for my first term, it was because I have experienced, being a native of Traverse City, trying to make a living here, and to me, that's kind of the most important thing. I don't want to spoil the area and nurture it, but yet I want a balance, because if you can't afford to live here, then you don't care about anything else, because you're going to be living somewhere else. So that's my perspective, and I always try to keep an open mind. And I want lots of things happening here, just making it a better place than it is already, and trying to do it with a balance. We get a lot of retirees, we get a lot of people who .com, they don't really, they come here to play, more or less. But there's still a lot of us here that are trying to make a living here too, and then play when we're not working. So I try to advocate for those people also. Just trying to keep an open mind.
Why would you vote for me? Again, that long-term view of things, every decision I take has an impact, and we need to play out those processes forward. I like to measure things, oddly enough, as a kind of a freelancer by trade and artist sometimes, and world traveler. It's not necessarily my bread and butter, but I find myself more and more asking, well, how are we measuring success? And real numbers. So we talked a lot about sidewalks today, and I think what's missed is when you add a sidewalk, you increase property values. When you increase property values, you're increasing the bottom line economically of the city. And that's left out of the equation a lot when I hear we can't afford it. Well, can you afford not to do it? Because 30, 40 years from now, we're competing with other communities that are adding sidewalks very quickly because they recognize that there's an economic benefit to it. Or things like parking lots. Are we approving developments that still want a suburban style, very large parking lot? Well, that's wasted space. That's just parking cars, maybe 8 hours a day, probably less than 6, and that sits empty. But can we continue to increase the efficiency of the land use around the city? Those are things that I'm looking at. For me, when I'm 60, 70, 80 years old, I can live in this town and be like, wow, look at this change that we've occurred. Yeah, it's more dense, but we also have, the traffic is basically the same as it was when I was 40 years old, which I am now. That's one aspect of why you vote for me. But another is what I've seen, we need to do a way better job. When I say we, I mean the city. The city government needs to do a way better job of engaging with young people. When young people come with an idea or a new energy, I think the first thing the city needs to do is embrace it. And figure out how to make it work, how to make it better if it needs to be. But too often I see people come to the city, young people that come to the city, they have a great idea, and they're just told no. And so they go away and they never come back. And it's just like a business. If you have a bad experience with your first change at Subway, you've probably never gone back to Subway. Sorry, that was me. It's the same thing with the city. If you have a bad experience, all it takes is one and you're done. And I think we need to do a better job of just, what are the ideas of young people coming into the town, into the city, embrace those ideas. Of course, they gotta have a process, and they gotta be turned over in terms of the bureaucracy of how budgets are made and things are done.